Let's bring in international security specialist Afzal Ashraf, who joins me now live from London. It's good to have you on the show, sir. I want to begin by asking you your assessment, your analysis of the strategy behind the Israeli offensive on Gaza up until now, the places that it is targeting, why it's targeting those places, and then I'll follow up with the ground offensive.
Good afternoon. As far as I can see, the Israelis are really doing what they've done over the last 20 years on a far grander scale, and that is targeting areas that could in any way loosely be associated with Hamas, but also areas such as churches and hospitals, which really don't have any obvious association with Hamas, and even if they did, cannot legally be targeted. But that's not stopping the Israelis. What they are doing is destroying the infrastructure to the extent that they possibly can. And it seems to fit a long-term strategy. By that, I mean over the last quarter of a century or more, probably more 30, 40 years, where the life in Gaza has to become as unbearable as possible for the population, so that the remote chances of a two-state solution can be reduced. And I would guess that in this particular scenario, the ability, or if you like, the Israeli justification for this will extend to significant destruction of infrastructure, facilities, and accommodation in Gaza. And it may well be followed if there is a successful ground invasion, or if that is called off, with some form of deal which will annex land for reasons of security. So the already slim area may well have a buffer zone built in of a few kilometers, which will have the impact of reducing the already very limited size of Gaza, should this ever come to some form of a fruition. And in that regard, the ground invasion may well happen, or it may well be a source of putting pressure to achieve just that sort of settlement.
That's what I want to get into. I mean, striking Gaza from the air or using artillery is a lot different than the possible and likely next stage of this military campaign. I'm talking about the ground offensive. I mean, as we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan with U.S. forces, or even most recently with Russian forces in Ukraine, a ground offensive, especially in urban areas, especially in a very highly densely populated like Gaza, is going to be extremely difficult.
Well, it's going to be very difficult, you're right, but it may not be as difficult as perhaps the ground offensives that took place in southern Lebanon in the past, after which Israel has not made any similar incursions. We have to not be careful not to exaggerate the ability of Hamas to be able to stop the Israeli forces. But I think it's very important not to get into the detail of this and try to answer your question in the overall strategic aims. And one of those aims, sadly, could be that Israel has tried very hard in the recent past to try and encourage the United States to attack Iran because of its nuclear facilities. It now knows that even if they step a few tanks over the line, that Iran and other players, such as their proxies in Lebanon and elsewhere, might be forced to get involved. And that might draw in the Americans, even though they, I'm sure, do not want to be drawn in. And historically, the Israelis have been pretty single-minded about their objectives. And in the 60s, they attempted a false flag operation against an American ship called the Liberty, which was intended to make the Americans feel that they had been attacked by the Egyptians in order to draw them to attack the Egyptians. As it was, this was not the case, although many American sailors died. And so this sort of ability of Israel to draw in the countries, including the United States, that it feels it needs for its own conception of security, is probably the most dangerous thing. But we must also bear in mind that for President or Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is an existential situation. If Hamas hadn't very fortuitously attacked when it did, he was facing a very dire political situation, and he can't afford to come out of this in anything other than some form of decisive victory for Israel, or at least some significant distraction, which will not bring that popular, if you like, opposition that he had against him, as well as the legal charges against him. So in that circumstance, his decision making is likely to be high stakes because he has a great deal to lose if he doesn't get this to at least go on for a while, and also if he doesn't get foreign involvement. So I think what we are facing over the next few days is strategically a very dangerous situation. What we have faced over the last few days is a ghastly, horrific situation. I believe that yesterday over 700 civilians were killed in Gaza, according to some reports. So what we're seeing here is, by any stretch of the imagination, a very unpleasant and a dangerous situation.
Okay. Afzal Ashraf, thank you very much for joining us here on the NewsHour. Do appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.